Hello, everybody, and welcome to another talk. Today, we're going to begin with Chris Miliankos, or Christos Miliankos, I should say. I should use your proper full title.
Thank
So,
you.
this is a bit of an unusual one today because I'm kind of normally on this channel, I focus more on Vedic topics, Ayurveda, Jyotish, Hastareka, Indian alchemy. I'm taking a little bit of a sidestep at the moment because I'm interviewing a number of iridologists. This is purely, I've always had an interest in iridology, but I've recently written a book on behavioral iridology, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to speak about my book and also interview some prominent in the field of iridology like Chris. So I've asked a number of other people. You'll see when you look at this channel, there'll be 3 or 4 other interviews I've done. I'm hoping to sort of continue with that because I find it a fascinating subject and I'd like to expand that a little bit more. But anyway, so Christos joins us today from the other side of the world. So we kind of got this weird time zone thing going on today. And actually, I'm kind of glad we did it a little bit later because an hour ago the sun was blasting on me and I was sort of washed out by bright sunlight. But you're sort of sat there end of the day. I'm at the beginning of the day. So we've got this sort of weird time zone thing going on. But I think we'll
Absolutely.
be totally fine. We'll get through it. Okay. So, for
Yeah.
the benefit of people sort of tuning in, not really knowing anything about the iridology, so we'll get onto that. And obviously yourself, perhaps you could just give everyone a bit of background about how you got
Sure.
interested in iridology and
Yeah.
your current work.
Well, when I was in my 20s, I studied science at university, and then I left and went traveling for quite a few years. And I really wanted to study naturopathy, and it was a bit of a difficult decision because it was a paid up front course, and I managed to do it by getting some by becoming a teacher as well. Like I became a high school teacher, so I had to work as a high school teacher, and I studied naturopathy in the evening. And my first ever class was iridology. It was Monday. It was back in '94. It was March when we first started school, and I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was Jensen's books that we worked through. We had 2 hour classes for a whole year, and it just became my favorite class very quickly. That
Mm.
and herbal medicine. So that's how I first started.
So,
Yeah.
would I be right in saying that naturopathy because I've got a friend of mine who lives local to me now, and she studied in Australia as well. She was saying that iridology is a part of the naturopathy schools. They do emphasize that.
Yes, it is. It was much more prominent. Like at the moment, I've actually got a student naturopath sitting with me in the clinic at the moment, and she's doing iridology next semester, but it's an elective. So it's only for one trimester. So it's not as widely taught because they're becoming so much more scientific.
Mm.
What I found with the students that I've seen recently is that they're becoming a lot more scientific, and the passion for herbs and homeopathy and things is not as strong, I would say. Yeah.
Okay.
But when I when I did naturopathy, it was we did it for 2 years.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay.
as a
I mean,
subject.
I don't really, my background's not sort of naturopathic. I mean, I know you've got many strings to your bow. You're doing bone therapy, you're doing naturopathy, iridology, herbalism. There's many things that you're doing. But do you consider yourself, even though you're kind of primarily, would you say the bone therapy is your main therapy, or it is kind of naturopathy?
No, not really. I would say Bowen and naturopathy are my two primary therapies that I use,
Mm.
but I use iridology on everyone because that
Right.
helps me assess where I'm at with the person's physical body if I'm doing Bowen therapy, with how they are, how their personality and behaviorally and emotionally they are.
Mm.
So, but the therapies I give everyone are mainly naturopathy. As you can see behind me, I've got a very big dispensary, a very big herbal dispensary, nutritionals, and yeah, so I use that pretty much with everyone.
Mm. So that's your main diagnostic. People coming in, the first thing you do is sit them down. Are you doing photography, or are you just doing it with a light?
Totally. No,
Yeah.
no, do photography. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can sort of, and are you showing them? Most people are kind of a bit horrified when they first see pictures of their eyes.
Yeah, no, I always try and say something fun for them, like, oh, oh, you've got a ring of harmony, or you've got a ring of determination, or something like that, that they're a bit intrigued,
Yeah.
and I always try and use words that are not scientific. Like I call lacuna flowers, I call pigments jewels,
Mm.
because people like those words, like, and they're not, they don't have a judgment around it.
Mm. Yeah, we
Yeah,
should probably explain to people those terms are used by or they're the phrases coined by the Rayard method. So this is another method of looking at the eye rather than looking at their sort of body connection. It's more to do with the sort of mind, personality.
yeah,
It's a much deeper and richer sort of conversation, and I find that's actually a good way to get started with somebody, because people are quite often more open about talking about those kind of things and going into like
yeah,
physical. But it can work both ways. Sometimes you get somebody who's got a physical problem, and then you can find that maybe there's an
yeah,
emotional component to it.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
what's the story behind how's the RAID model working in Australia? Is that because I believe that was also connected with the naturopathic school at one time, was it? Or is that?
Yeah, there has been some naturopathic schools that taught Rayard. When I learned iridology, it was back in the days where they taught that the iris changed, and there was nothing taught about behavioural or Rayard or anything back in the late 90s. I first came across that in the early 2000s when I did some extra work after I graduated, and I did. And to be honest, I saw an ad for an iridology class. It was called Emotional Iridology,
Mm,
and I thought to myself, because I'm a scientist and I've got two science degrees, I thought to myself, I'll get real. I mean, really? Like, but I'm open-minded as well. I thought I'm going to go, and that's when I was introduced to Rayard, and also to the thought that our eyes are stable, the
mm,
structure of our eyes are stable. So that was quite a fascinating day for me.
mm,
And that was probably one of the first days I actually really learned to love my iris and where I've come from.
mm.
Mm. All
Yes,
that I was always trying to fix it. I was
yeah,
always trying to fix the fibers and, get rid of these pigments and all of that
yeah.
sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think that was my major. That's where I first sort of stumbled into it. This whole thing about the first time you look and you think, oh my God, it's like you're all these open fibers, lacunas,
Yeah.
and pigments, and then you've just read all these things are terrible, and you've really got to sort of work on your
Yeah.
health and vitality to get rid of that. And of course, you do. You go into these religious programs, and nothing changes, and you get a bit
Yeah.
disheartened. And then I remember when I
Absolutely.
first sort of found Red. I mean, I think I went to one of my first Red seminars. The main, well, the instigator of the whole system, Denny Johnson, he was there, and he said, look, all these things basically are good. They're all there for your benefit. They've enabled you to survive, cope, and manage and adapt. So he said, why would you want to get rid of them? And to me, that just
Yeah.
turned the whole thing up on its head. That was a really great, thing a way to look at it. And I've always remembered that. It's a great inspirational moment.
Yeah.
Probably you had something
Yeah.
similar, I expect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Attached to raid, we should say raid is a very big subject. There are many facets to it, but also there's this birth order side as well. So there's
Yeah.
this idea that depending on where you are in the family, there are different traits. These can be the behavioral, even physical. There can be certain body types associated with each of the
Yeah.
birth orders. So how on earth are you integrating that? I suppose being body centered, being a body worker in some sense, that's probably really useful for you.
It is.
How have you been able to integrate that, and what sort of work are you doing with
You know
that?
what? When I first learned Rayard, or when I was first at that emotional iridology class, they brought a birth order, and I thought, what has this got to do with iridology? I
Mm,
really did. But it is such a great way to complement what we see in the personality and the behavior of the person, and it's a really great way, I feel, to learn how to, especially with children, how to make them shine.
mm,
And I think that's what we need to do with iridology, whether we're practicing behavioral or rayed or physical. Our main purpose is to help the people, or help the people that we're looking in their eyes, to be the best that they can be. And I find that rayed birth order really helps people to understand themselves, and also helps parents understand their kids a lot more.
mm,
And the rate is actually one of the reasons why we got five children, because we had three, and my wife wanted more, and I was like, oh, I don't know. Like I had a quite a busy day at work, and I was tired, and I was like, I don't think I think three's enough. But then when I thought, I thought, you know what? If we can go and do the RAID course together, and we did a RAID course with Edith Cuff, who teaches it so beautifully in the Gold Coast.
Mm,
And we went with our three little kids and my mum and my sister because they had to look after the kids. So it was a huge undertaking. And it was a 5-day thing. But what it taught us is that every single one of our children was born different
mm,
and had um, different facets to their personality that we could assist them for them to shine. And I
mm,
knew that if we're going to have more children in the mix, then they would need to be they were going to be different, but they would also need to be treated differently by us for them to achieve their highest potentials, and that's really been the case. So, I always every time I see Denny and Edith, I always say that they're the reason why we've got 5 children.
wow. That's a
Yeah.
kind of that's quite funny. I mean, are you sure you don't want to go for gold and just get the sixth one and then complete the order?
No, no, no.
I did a few of the red seminars back in. I started like late 90s, early 2000s. I kind of like parted company with it around 2002, 2003. I know the organization went through a bit of a sort of a restructuring after that, but I didn't really follow it so much after that. But I remember at the time when it got introduced, like you, I was a bit puzzled. I thought, what? I don't understand. I've come to learn about the eyes while we're talking about birth order. But when you see how the two work together, it's really good. I mean, well, better than good. It's amazing. But I think the thing
Mm,
I always struggled with was then you, on top of having six siblings, six girls, six boys. On top of that, you've also got to factor in that you've got these different eye structures as well.
mm,
So,
mm,
you could have like a six boy that was a kind of a thinking, analytical sort of type, and yet so it just kind of grew so much. And I always had a really hard time integrating that. I mean, how have you been able to work? Is that something you've integrated a little bit, or you're?
yeah, absolutely. I usually with most people, I find that RAID helps me be able to connect with them.
Mm,
And using behavioral iridology helps me be able to connect with them. So usually, and I'm still quite old school. I write. I have cards that I write their details on, but at the top of their card, I always put their birth order, and
hmm
always put their rated personality type,
mm,
and just some other things like they might have like rings of harmony or something like that. That helps me to be able to connect with them,
mm,
and it helps me with things that I can say to them. And I feel that when we can connect with our people that have come to see us, a lot of the work's done.
mm,
Like if people feel they're connected and they trust me,
mm,
then they're going to be able to take the herbs that I'm giving them easier. They're going to be able to do the things that I'm suggesting easier, and and I think the healing's going to be a bit easier. So that's how I kind of use Raya to integrate it. But I
mm,
always do always write their birth order and their personality type
mm,
and some things about their iris, whether that's they might have like a marking in the anxiety area or something like that. And that reminds me about how not how to view them, but how to speak to them.
mm.
Like, yeah.
So
Mm.
are you kind of working more with a constitution? I mean, I always think there's two approaches to looking at an eye. You basically either do a structured approach where you drill everything down you start with a blue eye, you start with a mixed or a brown, and
Yeah.
then you drill down on all your structure. Or are you kind of more like a freestyle where I mean, I get the sense that you're quite intuitive. So I think you'd probably be somebody that would be able to look and just see that one point of interest and then focus in on that and probably cut through a lot of the clutter and just get to why the person had actually come to see you. But
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
what what do you feel more comfortable with
I
as a structure?
usually, I usually do a bit of both. So probably, maybe a bit more intuitive, but I always start with the color because I feel like people need guidance in their best diets. So I find that the color, the constitutional color is a really good way to do that.
Mm,
And then I usually do three things that jump out at me physically.
mm,
So, for example, in my eyes, my primary nurture points are my heart, my kidneys, and my lungs.
mm,
So And they're just little markings that I have in my eyes that jump out at me when I look at the iris.
Mm,
So if I went to see someone and they made me a tonic, let's say that focused on the kidneys, the heart, and the lungs, I'm going to feel better because they're my nurture points. I don't have to necessarily look at every single marking.
mm,
But I usually try and speak very common language, as I was saying before. I call lacuna flowers, I call pigments jewels, and I point things out to them. And usually what I do then is say something else that is, from behavioral or raid,
mm,
whether that's, like, you've got a beautiful flower right in the heart center, which is, often to do with love. We
mm,
might have a discussion about love and what, how, do they love their life? What do they do? What makes their heart sing?
mm,
Things like that. So I always try and do something like that as well in my first consultation. So it's
mm,
not just purely physical.
mm. And what about the great conundrum of the brown eye? So when somebody comes in, I mean, I don't know what's the kind of color, what's the kind of color range you're getting in Australia? What's you seeing on a
Well,
day-to-day
in
basis?
Australia, there's a lot of mixed and blue eyes that we see, but as you know, 59% of the world's got brown eyes, and there's lots of people with brown eyes in Australia. And I find with really good photography, especially really when you change the ISO setting, and don't ask me what that stands for because I've forgotten. But when I change the setting in the camera to allow more light in, I get really amazing photos.
Mm,
And last year I went to teach. I taught physical iridology last year in China,
mm,
and I was almost embarrassed about how much my course focuses on blue and mixed eyes.
right.
Like a lot of I mean, I've definitely got examples of brown eyes,
Yeah.
but so much focuses on blue and mixed. And I was actually really embarrassed because everyone in my class had brown eyes, and everyone in the class had different brown eyes.
Of course,
Yeah,
it's still got a kind of a very uniform sort of neurogenic, dense fiber, but you can see more than you would think. But I mean, it's just, I was thinking more when you get those really dark, indigenous kind of like, or over here it'd be like Afro-Caribbean or something, where you literally just
yeah,
get a brown disc and you can't see anything no matter how you light it. I mean, it gets very difficult. Of course, in
yeah.
post processing with like Photoshop, you could probably bring some more detail out. But I just wondered
Yeah.
if you have you got any tips and tricks for that? That's
Yeah. So basically, having a high aperture setting and having a really high ISO setting, I've been able to get some really amazing photos of the people I see in Sri Lanka. I've been to Sri Lanka 3 times with iridology.
mm,
And a lot of them have really dark eyes, and we get some great shots. But I remember always my iridology teachers that we used to be scared of brown eyes when we were studying because we only had our torch.
mm,
And if it's not there, it's not there. Don't invent it.
no. And
Yeah,
if you do see something like one thing, it becomes so much more significant because it's
exactly.
cut through all that
Yeah,
clutter to be
yeah,
prominent. It must be really important.
exactly. Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Interestingly, I got in the book I've just published, I managed to get a picture of a someone with a really good, the binocular heterochromia, where they literally have one blue eye, one brown eye. So this was a lady
right.
from the Middle East,
Yeah,
just irregular, dense brown eye. But of course, the eye that's got no brown pigment in it, it's just this wild kind of emotional, wavy, open fibers. You can see everything. It just goes to show you, it just goes to prove it that underneath that
yeah,
pigmentation, it's just the same. It's just a
exactly.
layering over the top. It's
Yeah,
all there under the surface.
yeah,
That's quite
yeah,
it's quite incredible to see that like that. Have you come across
absolutely.
anything like that? Anything really
Oh,
unusual?
I've definitely seen two different color eyes, but probably not that different. Where there's one blue, one really dark brown, but definitely lots of different colored. Blue, the left and right being different. Yeah.
Hmm. What about working with sort of left and right? Are you still? I mean, it's a long time since I've done RAID, so I'm kind of trying to remember my sort of theory behind it. But behaviorally, we're definitely looking at like the right eye father, left eye mother. Are you
Yeah.
kind of it's still because I know there was this kind of like left brain, right brain dominant that they were
Yeah.
using in the system.
I don't necessarily do too much with the left and right brain. I mean, a little bit, but
Mm,
yeah, definitely. Being the right, it's more from the father, and left more from the mother. But that's not 100% rule. Like,
mm,
I think anything that we see, we need to ask the right questions.
mm,
I think anything we see in the iris, leads us to the questions to ask to get the answers that we need,
Mm.
basically to help them. Yeah.
And of course, you're
Mm.
doing so much more than just, after you've done the iris work, then you're doing sort of body
Yeah.
work and herbs and stuff
Yeah.
like that as well. So it's a
Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
So what's your current interest? What are you pursuing at the moment? I noticed that you had a rather detailed course online, many different aspects to that. I mean, what's your kind of current projects? What are you up to at the moment?
Well, I've finished my book on iridology last year, and I'm actually that's called People with Eyes Like These, and it's a really lovely book that encompasses some Rayed, some behavioural stuff, and some physical stuff, and it's a coffee table book for anyone that wants to learn about iridology. So it's not necessarily a textbook, but
Mm,
it's a book for anyone interested in iridology. But at the moment, I'm working on another book called the 80-15-5 rule. And what it is, basically, a lot of people, when we talk about what to do, with their diet, with their lifestyle, etc., they usually say, do I have to do this forever? And I usually say, no, 80% of the time, I want you to follow these recommendations. 15% of the time, if you visit Andrew and he's made you this beautiful lasagna and, you're not celiac, just, you could have it and just enjoy it without quizzing him whether he's gluten-free and whether he's prayed while he did it all, or all of that sort of stuff, just to be a little bit more lenient with things. And then 5% of the time is your naughty time. So time where if you really want, like my naughty time is usually, I love chocolate and chili together. So if I ever go to a shop where they have a chocolate and chili, like chocolate or a drink or something like that, I'm always going to have it.
mm,
So I'm writing a book about that basically because people love to sort of have more guidance with how much to do things,
mm,
and I'm including lots of recipes and things like that as well. And yeah, so that's a really fun book. So that's going to come out in the next few months. I'm busy working with that, but
mhm.
I'm also busy. Kathy from Texas and we're going to be teaching sclerology soon. So
Okay.
also really busy getting lots of case studies and things ready for our classes.
I was
Hmm.
going to ask you about that because obviously we should say here, Chris and Kathy both run this amazing. Is it a podcast or how would you do it?
Yeah, it's like a show.
Yeah, and
You
you've kind of
can
done
visit
what
it.
I'm like trailing behind. I'm sort of like chasing up and trying to interview the same people, but you've really kind of
That's a lot.
interviewed everybody in the field. So if there's anybody that interests you in the world of iridology, they'll be on that show. So if you go on to the
Iridology around the world. Look it up on YouTube. But
yeah,
it's amazing how many iridologists we're meeting around the world. Like we've recently finished interviewing a lady from South Africa and a lady from Nigeria was really amazing recently. Um, we've had some great interviews with an amazing iridologist in Iran. So
mm.
there's so many people out there. Really is.
What
Yeah.
are you up to now? Like 80 people?
I think we're on 70 something, 75
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah.
I mean, I've just got a bookmark, so it always pops up, and I watch the latest one. And occasionally, it's good because you'll take a break for one session, and
Yeah.
you and Kathy will just analyze something, which is really good as well.
Yeah.
That's great. It's great to see you
Yeah.
kind of playing off each other because you've got such sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
different styles, so it works really
Yeah.
well.
We've got quite a good banter. She's got lots of lovely little Texan little mannerisms, and I'd like to, feed off that.
So we'll put that up as a link. People can go and visit that.
Yeah.
Highly recommend that. It's lots of good info on there. So the book, just to recap, the People with Eyes Like These, yeah, the book you
Yeah.
did. So this is just like so it's just explaining the basic constitutional types. So you're not
Yeah.
actually showing any maps or anything like that in there, or
No, there's two maps in there. There's two
yeah,
maps for sure,
okay,
and yeah, we're doing the basic constitutional types, and also we know I'm doing rings like rings of harmony, rings of determination, things like that you
mm,
can analyze your own eye. We go through what lacuna means, what flowers mean, what jewels mean, and then we talk a little bit about birth order. We don't go through all six, but we introduce birth order.
that's pretty comprehensive. That's not really a coffee table.
Well, it's quite a big book, but and it's just beautiful pictures. Like I tried to sort of get the best visuals and the best printing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really think that when we're doing iridology, we need to have really good quality pictures.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, before and afters, they're kind of is really useful as well. I managed to finally track down. There's one image I wanted to put in the book, which was really important. It was somebody who'd had a corneal. They were at a work accident. Something had hit them in the eye, and what happened
Yeah.
was the area underneath where it was something hot. It had gone into the eye. It actually stuck on the cornea, and then a few days later, due to sort of washing, it had released and come out. You could see like a scar almost in the area, but the iris underneath developed a yellow patch, and I thought that was really interesting. So
Wow.
I've managed to get a picture of that in the book to show that. So it's almost like things that are outside. It doesn't necessarily have to be directly on the iris. Something
Yeah.
coming from the outside could sort of trigger a
Yeah.
color change on there. So that I just wanted to put that in. I've noticed that as an anomaly, and some of the factors like darker pigment spots appearing when people are quite late into like 50s, 60s. I've seen these dark spots appear. So, the eye, although like we were saying earlier, that it is fixed and it's not changing. Like it's not like it used to be taught that it was
Yeah.
like a car dashboard and the readings would change every day. But there are things that are happening all the time, aren't there? Things are being added to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Have you
Yeah.
seen any really significant changes like that
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times there's changes, due to accidents, like puncture accidents and things like that, and as a reflex organ
Mm,
or reflex area, it's has to be both ways.
mm,
Like when we have a change due to let's say a puncture in the pupil, or example, that's going to have an effect on the particular areas that we're looking at, whether that's personality or be it physical or anything. So
mm,
I yeah, definitely seen lots of things like that. Yeah,
mm. I know a lot
yeah,
of iridologists who took an interest in the kind of red behavioral approach, but they never really got it down. However, they are very happy with using the ring, so that's become a
yeah,
big part of their service. So they'll do a
yeah,
regular iridology analysis, but they'll incorporate the
yeah,
quality. There are sort of at least six or seven different types of iris ring that
yeah,
we can look at,
yeah.
and so they
And
might.
the rings are an amazing way to focus on their personality and just to give them a bit of understanding. It's like, oh
Mm.
yeah, I am a perfectionist.
Mm. Coming back, just summarizing everything. So if people want to get in contact with you or look at the work you're doing, I saw you had a rather nice course on there, and it looks like it's doing a lot of other things apart from iridology. But what's the best way for people to sort of get in contact with you, see what you're doing?
So my website's pretty easy. It's just christosmili.org, and you can find lots of my courses there. And yeah, and I also have my clinic where I'm actually working at the moment is nenaturopathicgroup.com.au. And that has lots of great sort of downloads, about candida diets and this diet and that diet example also. But you can contact me with either of those ways. But probably the easiest one would be christosmili.org.
Okay. And if they wanted to get a copy of the book just directly from you, or do you prefer them to buy it on like a platform like Amazon or
It's better
something?
through Amazon unless you're close, because I mean otherwise there's lots of postage costs and things, and Amazon do it pretty easily.
Okay.
Hmm.
And then, of
Yeah.
course, Iridology around the world, you and Kathy, I'll put the links up for all
Yes.
of these will be at the end
Yeah.
so people can follow the links.
Fantastic.
And yeah, I mean, anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to mention?
No, I mean, thank you so much for having me, and I'll just, I mean, one of my favorite quotes was that I learned from Tony Miller is like, the eyes are a reflection of what we've inherited physically, emotionally, behaviorally, spiritually from our last four generations, and whether we manifest the best case scenario or the worst case scenario depends on how we eat, drink, think, live, and love. I just love that quote,
Mm,
and as iridologists, I think we're in the best place to help them with how they eat, drink, think, live, and love.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, it's so accessible. That's the great thing is that you
Yeah,
don't need any sophisticated equipment. Anyone can look. So it's begin with
exactly.
your own and then start looking at other people's. So
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, look, thank you very much.
Thanks for
I'm
having
sorry
me.
about the time zone thing. I know it's kind of weird and we try to get together
Good.
so many times, but I appreciate you
Yeah.
coming on. And yeah, brilliant. Thank you for taking the
Thank
time to
you.
explain that.